I found it. It's just the YouTube channel /live, that's what I thought, but I wanted to be certain before I put that in Zoom. I don't know if it really matters that much. Okay. I think we are up and running here. Just double check. Yeah, great. We're good. So yeah, I'm assuming you all can hear me all right. But thank you for joining us in another React Denver. As you know, we've been doing these virtual events here for the past few months, and last month it seems like that was only a couple weeks ago, but we've had a number of really great talks, even though they're virtual. Of course, we would love to have something more, personable and face to face, and be back in, touring and having these talks face to face. But given the state of the world right now, we just have to work with what we got. So we may decide that I know there's been some conversation about maybe moving to a different schedule while we are kind of on this virtual setup. But as I'm seeing right now, we have a pretty good turnout here, I think, on the Zoom call. And so the biggest thing is, I think, attracting speakers. And so if anyone has any interest in speaking, if you don't plan on giving a lightning talk tonight, certainly, please do talk to us. I think with all the craziness in the world right now, it's become even harder to get people to want to commit to giving a talk, which I realize can be pretty demanding. So on both your time, attention, and just all of those things. So really appreciate you spending some time with us tonight, though, on this Tuesday evening. And I think we have some great talks for you, and certainly some more kind of beginner-oriented talks, which I think is great. And I just want to reemphasize that for this meetup, that's something that we would never shy away from, is having those beginner talks, especially with React being such a beginner-friendly framework. We recognize that having, like newbies or just relatively fresh people who are coming into the framework give talks on stuff that perhaps the rest of us as intermediate or expert developers would totally glaze over. It's really valuable to have that beginner perspective, right? So I think we have some entry-level talks tonight, which I'm really excited for. But let me get into it here a little bit. I hope you guys can see the slides. I've already kind of given the quick intro here with all this COVID crap that we're having to sort through. Hoping to see everybody face-to-face here soon, but who knows when that's going to be. As always, we just wanted to give a shout out to our sponsors who we could not run this meetup without. Zoom was very, very kind to us in giving us an enterprise account to work with here and to run our meetups through. So shout out to Zoom and to Michael Harrington over there, who was very gracious in setting us up with the sponsorship. And then, as always, we love to shout out Turing, given the fact that they've let us use their space for so long to host the physical meetup. And then in addition to Turing, Salt Lending, they pay for our meetup dues and are very gracious supporters of the group as well, and also happen to pay my paycheck. So I'm very grateful to them. They're my employer. So with that aside, also I wanted to make sure that we shout out our Open Collective supporters, as I think we've got a few of you on the Zoom call here, but we also solicit support from Open Collective, and this has certainly been a boon to us when we have months where we're not able to secure sponsorship or pay for pizza back when we were in person. So we haven't had to lean on it near as much here lately, but Open Collective has been really great in enabling us to collect some of these sponsorship donations, if you will, and then also it has been really handy in keeping our expenses transparent then to the rest of the community. So thank you to our supporters on there. I can't tell you how much we appreciate that. Normally we do have a section, in the physical in-person meetup, of course, for who's hiring and to give announcements as it relates to that. Given the state of the Zoom call, I think what's best is if you have a job opening right now, or even if you're looking for work, if you'd like to post that on the meetup event page, that's probably the best place to actually, get some visibility on that right now. So feel free to check that out and post any job openings you have, or the fact that you're looking, whatever works. And I think the same goes for announcements here. I know there are a number of virtual events that are still happening, and our very own Will Klein in the coming weeks is giving a talk at Cascadia JS. That's here, I think, in the very first week of September. So perhaps we'll see some of you guys, present at that virtual conference. I'm really curious how that's going to go. I don't really have any other announcements, but if you have something that you want to shout out, again, I think the meetup page is probably the best place for that, or feel free to post it in either the Zoom chat here or the YouTube chat if you'd like. And let's see. So with that, I think if you didn't catch it earlier, unfortunately, we had a speaker who had to drop out due to some personal things, but that's all right. We love having another lightning talk night. And so I think we had a couple signups here for lightning talks. And if we don't, then that's totally cool too. I don't know if Sam is here. Sam Bolin.
I'm here.
Oh, awesome. There he is. So Sam, right now you're the lone sign up, which we really appreciate the sign up here. It looks like naive async. Is that the topic you'd like to give a talk on?
Yeah. And I understand the bigger theme for this meeting was talking about state management. And I didn't know if there was going to be a bigger talk around Redux and kind of how that ties into React and that ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's maybe Jonathan could answer that better, but would love to hear either way. Even if he doesn't get into Redux, would love to hear your talk on naive async. If you want to maybe share your screen, or if you don't have stuff to share, that's totally fine too.
No, I got something. Absolutely. Give me a moment.
Cool.
All right. You guys can see my screen just fine?
Perfect. Yep.
All right. Right on. Well, hey, I'm Sam. I work at Stackhawk. We're a cybersecurity company located here in Denver. Today, I'd like to give just a quick talk about naive async, and it's a open source library I wrote before I started working at Stackhawk, but we have actually been using this extensively for our Redux state management. I kind of glossing ahead a bit, React is, as a framework, it's pretty intuitive in terms of how it works and how it operates. It's a big tree. And the JSX allows us to define components and HTML syntax that goes all the way down. But if you want to reach up into that tree and access state outside of the typical tree structure, then you need to use a tool like Redux. And while I would say React is pretty intuitive, I would say Redux takes a lot. And especially Redux at scale becomes pretty crazy. So even like their to-do example, they talk about all the things needed when working with Redux to be able to, you need to write the action creators and the types that they contain and the payloads that they operate with and the reducers that those action creators then get processed through. And then when you want to use those with connected components, you need to write selectors for your components. And then you need to use additional libraries like Redux Thunk or Redux Saga if you want to be able to tie this kind of stuff into various async operations. And the typical thing that we have found, or at least that I found, was when writing React and writing Redux, we have various async operations that we are going to want to make calls to, and then we're going to want to use the results of those async operations within the state of them synchronously in our React components. And so this is where naive async comes in. So this is basically just a promise wrapper. And this is definitely pretty high level. I know this conversation was a bit more about was more oriented towards beginners. But basically, if you have a promise, it's an asynchronous function. And naive async is something that wraps that promise and then turns it into something that it automatically writes the selector. It creates your reducers for you. It creates action creators for you so that you're able to manage that state nicely. So, for example, I just have a promise here that takes in some params and then spits out a value and might fail. And so if I press these various buttons, food bar baz, it passes in a different param, and then it does this promise, this async operation, and if it fails, it will set the error state, and if it succeeds, it will set the data state with what it gets back. And so what this allows us to do is we don't have to write any Redux at all, but we get something that provides all the things we'd want from Redux for managing our asynchronous state. And so basically every promise we have works in the notion of a life cycle of basically just having these four states: status, params, error, and data. Params is what you pass into it. When you call the promise, it goes into an in-flight state with the params you passed in. And then either your promise resolves and it goes into a done state with your data on with a data set, or it goes into an error state. And it has a bunch of opinionated aspects about it. For example, the errors are always strings because you really don't want to be putting error objects into your Redux store or date objects or things of complex structures. And then the data is however you want to type it. And so this library, it's available on GitHub. You could see the, you always got some potential security vulnerabilities. But the GitHub repo is available at github.com/untra/naive-async. You could also see the website I have made for this at naiveasync.untra.io. And there's a page with a number of tests written that show it with various examples, and how that page gets and how those examples get used. So the goal of the naive async library is to basically use Redux at scale without having to write any Redux whatsoever. How much time do I got?
If you want to elaborate on more, feel free to. Normally, if we had more lightning talks set up, I would tell you to cut it short. But if there's more examples that you feel are worthwhile to show, feel free to.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you could see these same tests. You could, if you go to naiveasync.io/test, you could see the tests on GitHub. And you could see the corresponding code I'm looking at. But I originally wrote the component as being a React component, looking like this. So if we take a look, it's a component that has, it takes an ID, and the ID is the basically the name of your Redux operation. And this is also what gets appended to your action creators. And then you have your promise, the operation that you pass in. And this isn't actually a promise. It's a function that returns a promise, and that's important because we want our promises to be invoked at our discretion. And so the way we then use this is kind of as an React exotic component, but we're then able to have the state, the status of our promise JSON stringified. We could then get the params that we passed in at all, and then we could have access to the error and the data object for it, and then we could call it at our discretion. So particular, like looking at this test number 2, it can be invoked when the callback is invoked. We could have a little bit of React that looks like this, and this part is definitely strange. This is not conventional, but it lets us have a object that operates like this, where I can invoke it at my discretion, and it's wrapping my promise, And under the covers, there is Redux happening. So if I take a look and I open my Redux DevTools, and my Redux DevTools isn't finding my website. Oh, that's sad. It's finding the meetup page. That's amusing.
You might have to
That's weird.
I've had that problem as well, where it won't catch what, my Redux store.
No store found. May have to. Oh, I may have to be exposing. Oh, fudge.
I think it depends on it doesn't also need to be a development server. Or maybe you have yours set up differently.
Possibly. I'm hosting this on GitHub. They might be hiding that. Okay. But yeah, no, if I do yarns. Oh yeah, right. I didn't think I would be getting this involved with the lightning talk. All right. So I think with this guy now, should be able to see it. Yeah? Might be missing something. I apologize. I almost want to show this on the company website.
That's all right. I think this is a great intro to it, and I hate to cut you off, Sam, but just in case there are some other signups, I think this is really cool to see. And yeah, I love the fact that you're so you're basically just bundling all of these. You're making this naive async as sort of an all-in-one tool to handle those promises with Redux sort of built in.
Absolutely. And the key thing under the covers is it's creating this lifecycle object, which is what's managing this whole state. And that is able to provide the action creators. So being able to call and pass in params, and then that invokes your promise. Things like sync, so that you can constantly recall it without having to reset the state. And then it comes with a selector built in. It sets the reducer and it has a whole managed reducer, and so you don't have to write any of that. And so under the covers, this is doing all Redux, but you don't have to write any of the Redux involved. All you're doing is just wrapping a promise.
Nice. So no boilerplate. I mean, other than the boilerplate for naive async, but perhaps you're cutting out a few steps in the process there, right?
Yeah, and I'll see if I could show just what the boilerplate looks like, because it has its own reducer and it has its own reducer and it has its own middleware, and that gets plugged in. But then once that's plugged in, it all just kind of works. And that's what makes it really magical.
Awesome. That's terrific.
Yep. Oh, yeah, this is why this wasn't being exposed. So, yeah, you define the store that you have, and then I expose just naive async reducer, and then all the calls you make get wrapped into there, and then the middleware, which then handles the calling of the promises.
Nice.
So it's open source. No one else is using it, but it's actually used extensively at Stackhawk.
Very cool. And so if we wanted to check that out, could you post a link to that GitHub maybe in the events page?
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrific. We do have a question in the chat. I don't know if you care to address that now, but we have a question from Chris Clark. He was asking, is there a reason that you chose to develop naive async rather than use React context, I think is what he's asking.
So I actually started this. This is a bit different than React context, but I did start development on it before context really became a thing, as well as React hooks. And I know that Redux now has some hooks specific for it. but we haven't really used those. However, one of the things that was really happening with, I was previously working at Logarithm, and we were using ReactVar and ReduxVar, and that was getting to be pretty extensive. We were using Redux Saga, and then we tried switching to Thunks. And what would happen when writing Redux is there's a lot of copy and paste errors that wind up happening because you're writing similar boilerplate, and it's like everything looks similar, but it's easy to make just little mistakes, and then tracking those mistakes down becomes crazy. And for the most part, we were just writing the same thing over and over again. We just wanted to wrap an async call and then use that within our components. So this is why I developed this.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. That's a great first lightning talk here.
Right on.
Really appreciate that. And I mean, yeah. Some people are bigger sticklers, I think, about keeping a lightning talk trimmed down. I love the idea of a short one, but like I said, we only have one sign up right now, so I'm happy to let you riff on that a little bit more. Do we have anybody by chance that wants to give a lightning talk that maybe didn't get to sign up? If you do have one to give, I guess feel free to just post it in the chat. I have a quick little, I don't know if you can even describe it as a talk, but during, I think, one of our previous lightning talks, I gave a quick or kind of an update on some resources that I found really useful, both from like a VS Code extension standpoint, and I went through some resources that I found really helpful at the time, and I think I got some positive feedback on that, and so I have a few new VS Code extensions that I was hoping to run through, and perhaps you already use them, or perhaps they'll be helpful to you in your day-to-day dev work. But these are things that I've just found that I've been leaning on a lot lately, and so just running through these here real quick with a code example on the side. So the first one I have, actually, I had this file off to the right side, and I hope you guys can see that. I'll try to zoom in. But I have this file to the right where I'll kind of demonstrate some things for you here. But this first extension that I've really been leaning on a lot lately, especially as I've tried to increase my productivity in terms of planning and making sure I have things mapped out in advance, is this Better Comments extension, which if you see lines 10 through 17 here, I've kind of mapped out or just written out a few notes to myself and a hypothetical story as to how I might attack this and keep track of my bullet list to-do items. It's something I've been doing a lot in the last couple months for my stories, and I've really found that this extension has helped keep me on track, especially as I have gone into more of a management role at my company where I've been having to context switch a lot. Having something that formats my comments in the code is super helpful, where I can just, once I'm done putting out a fire, I can jump back into the code or whatever it was I was working on, and then address that with these comments. So Better Comments, really all it does is it adds highlighting depending on the symbol that you use in the comments itself, which is pretty cool. So as you can see here, it's just the question mark gives it some blue highlighting, and then the exclamation mark here down below gives it red highlighting. A to-do highlights it in orange. And yeah, it's simple as that, but it's actually super helpful. The other one, which I know is really popular and I think most people use by now, especially in JavaScript or TypeScript, is this bracket paracolorizer. Just helps you keep track of deeply nested brackets and parentheses. It's super helpful in just kind of being able to parse that visually. Another very popular one, which you perhaps can see here in my import files on this file to the right side of my editor, is import cost. It's super nice to see, what if you're pulling in Lodash or Ramda or pick your package of choice, knowing what kind of cost it's going to make on your bundle size or just to the file itself, I think is useful. Blazing over that one again, Path IntelliSense. This one is extremely useful, as I will demonstrate here on the right side. So if I were just gonna like let's pretend I am going to import table columns again, which is just a component that I have locally, or I'm sorry, in my util directory. So as soon as I begin typing this path, what path IntelliSense should do, well, it's not doing it for me right now. So what it should do, what it normally does, yeah, see, so now it's kicking in. I think maybe VS Code, I'm just having a memory issue given that I'm streaming on Zoom. But normally it will actually give me suggestions here, as you can see. So I want app, util, and as soon as I type that next slash, it should give me more suggestions for what's in that directory, which is super useful for importing new files, importing local components. You don't have to like open up the actual file tree to do that. So that's another great extension if you're not already using that. And let's see, 2 more here. The other one I have is this toggle quotes extension, which is very, very basic, but all it does is it toggles quotes for you. So on line 53 here, if I'm using class names, the very popular class names package, say for example, I wanted to use a template string or double quotes for some reason, all I would have to do is hit the command quote sign, and it changes that. It just toggles those quote symbols. So I can just, the amount of times I've had to go through and adjust quotes at the beginning and end of a string, it's a lot of time. And if I can just hit command quotation, whatever that is, it's super useful, I think. So I've been leaning on that one quite a bit. And then the final extension that I wanted to speak about is one that I really didn't expect I would use at all, but I find that I use it like every day, especially in debugging something. It's just this, it's wrap console log simple, and all it is it just, whatever you have highlighted, given that highlighted portion, if I press Command L on it, what it does is it's just going to wrap that in a console log statement with that object as the string argument to the beginning, and then this dot props here at the end. So if I just wanted to see what props was for that component, it's as simple as highlighting this dot props and hitting Command L. It works everywhere. It works in a for a function argument. It works. It's just I'm kind of amazed, frankly, at how much I use the thing nowadays. Especially if you get tired of writing log statements all over your code for debugging. So cannot recommend that one enough. And if you see on the left side of it, there are many other commands that I think you can use to format the console log statement. I just always use the command L1 because I like having the variable in there, but there are other ways to go about that too. So that is the quick wrap up on extensions I'm using right now and finding useful. So hope perhaps there's something there that you can use in your day-to-day if you are using VS Code like myself. So that's it for me. Did we have any other lightning talks by chance?
Would now be the time for me to go, or did you mean people that didn't sign up?
I was mostly just thinking, yeah, people who maybe did or didn't sign up. If anybody in the chat here, I'm not seeing that we have anybody. So let's see. Yeah, I think we're probably ready for you, Jonathan, if you want to share your screen.
Awesome.
Yeah, go for it. And I'm sorry, that's a terrible introduction. Jonathan was nice enough to speak up, I think, a few months back and mention that he had a talk to give on some entry-level React and Vue stuff. And I just want to reemphasize that we're absolutely open to talks of all skill levels. So whether it be something more expert level on promise wrapping or something more, beginner entry level on just like state management and or comparing two frameworks, I think is really useful. We get a lot of people who attend this meetup from all skill sets. And so we're absolutely on board with, having talks of all, within that range is what I'm trying to say. So thank you, Jonathan, and please take it away.
Aloha, everybody. I'm Jonathan Higger. I have a background in like engineering, and I kind of just decided the only part of engineering that I really liked was programming. So I wound up going back to school for web development, and that brings us here. So I graduated in around Mayish, and for my final project, I did a Vue project, and that was after learning a little bit of React in school. So I figured it might be cool to come to this meeting and show people just a little bit of what Vue is like in comparison to React. If you're just kind of curious about how things work in the software, I happen to like Vue a little bit more because of the way some stuff works. So before I actually go into showing you maybe how they work, I'm going to show you maybe the project and why specifically the way Vue works worked better for me. So what I made was a typing test. The typing test is just simple, as you type, not too crazy. But the thing I want you to think about when looking at this, other than the fact that it's amazing because I made it, is actually just the fact that think about like maybe the types of algorithms you'd have to do to just figure out like how the word breaks apart and exactly what's going on there, how you're kind of updating that with state. Just sort of bear that in mind, that that's the context in which maybe I decided to gravitate towards Vue as I start explaining some of this stuff to you. So first of all, let's do a quick comparison. So in React, I put state at the top, but maybe there could have been a better way to phrase this. But in React, after you set state, that whole operation happens asynchronously. And in Vue, it also happens asynchronously. The difference between the two is that in Vue has an intelligent like back. I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but the software will figure out when you're trying to use state and update that state before you use it. Another thing about React is considered to be a less opinionated framework in that it's pretty flexible. It's almost like an extension of JavaScript, where Vue really feels more like its own thing. It has a specific way it wants you to write things. In React, you basically use JSX and return it pretty much in a way that you would do it in regular JavaScript, which makes it feel very intuitive for JavaScript developers. But in Vue, you have to use this built-in templating called v-directives. Another difference between the two is in React, let's say you want to alter the state of a child component, you have to do it by passing a function bound to a, either a class or a function, and then you pass that function, and then you invoke that function from the child component. And since the child component is bound to the parent, it updates the state. Pretty simple stuff. But in Vue, it actually works a little bit differently. In Vue, it works as if it's an event. The same exact concept that applies to event bubbling you do in Vue, where you create your own custom event and you could attach things to that event. And that's how you trigger something to happen in a parent component. In React, the dev tools can be a little frustrating. And in Vue, I think they come out a little cleaner. Part of this could be maybe I didn't get deep enough into React, but I'd be happy to show you a little bit more of what I mean by that as we go along here. So first of all, there's the layout, which I'm assuming that mostly everybody here is familiar with React. I think what actually might be better than going over this slide is to just open up a Vue project that I have. So this is a Vue component for game.
Can you bump the font size on that just a little bit, John?
What was that?
Can you bump up the zoom in on the code a little bit? It's difficult.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Give me a second. I'm a little bit new with the Windows commands here.
No sweat.
Let's see. Oh, there we go. Trying to get rid of this terminal so you don't have to see it. Oh, that did the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. Okay, there we go. Is it visible now? Can you guys see it pretty well? I can't really see a chat or anything. By the way, if anybody has any questions, like feel free to interrupt. I'm very okay with like having a dialogue, and I don't get too flustered if someone just like wants to like just throw out a question. But anyways, so this is like your templating here. It's very much like what you return JSX with in React. Pretty simple here. As you can see, there's some differences. Like here, you're going to have some stuff that I haven't told you about yet called like V4s. You're going to have keys here, classes, and all this stuff is Vue specific. These kinds of like V anythings, they're called V directives. Then you have your script tag. Your script is where all your like functionality goes. So here is where you're going to do your imports. Here is where you're going to just name your component. Props is like the exact same as it would be in React, just with a little bit of different of a syntax. Created is just like a component did mount. You've got data, which this is your state variables. And then you have watch, which watch is, I'm not going to go into that today, but I'd be happy to explain it if anyone's curious. And then you have these things called computed, which I'm also going to talk about in a bit. And methods are going to be like your functions. The main thing that I want you guys to be aware of is that all this is in the script tag. So this whole file is organized first with, again, the template at the top. I didn't realize how long I would be scrolling for. The templating at the top, the script stuff in the middle, and then at the end, we have our styling. So you could also do it like sort of like React has use style in their components. In Vue, you can also do like a style. It almost looks like an HTML tag and you kind of incorporate it in the templating. But one thing that's super nice about Vue is in Vue, if you type in style and then scoped, right now, all of this CSS styling is actually scoped to this component, which is pretty nice, very simple. You could also make this like Sass and other, CSS libraries just by typing something in right there. I don't want to type it in wrong and mess up the server for right now, just for the purposes of this. So hopefully that gave you kind of an idea of what Vue is like. Now, here I'm about to touch on my favorite part of Vue. It makes it sound like my favorite part of Vue, but I mean Vue. And if you look here, this is a test you could sort of run in Vue. If you're in the middle of a function or something like that, you say console.log count, then you write this dot count plus equals 1. Then you write console.log count again. Well, you get 1 like you would expect. You had the count was 0, you add 1 to the count, and then immediately after you console log it, so you get 1. Well, in React, it doesn't really work like that. And this is whether or not you're using hooks or you're using classes. If you were to console.log count inside of a method, and let's say your count was at 0, and then you were to say set your count equals count plus 1. Okay, then you console.log count again. It's 0. Well, why is it 0? Great question. So the reason why that happens is kind of like I talked about before, is that in Vue, it actually has a loop going on that allows it to check to see, has this user called state before I've updated state? And it prioritizes, if the user has, then it prioritizes updating that state prior to giving it to the user. Now this pairs a lot nicely with another one of Vue's properties. So this is called computed properties. What are computed properties? So computed properties are effectively like state, but it's just a manipulated form of state. So you could think about it like this. Let's say you have a state for, I don't know, the pounds of meat that you have in a grocery store item, right? A computed property might be represented by transforming pounds into kilograms. So a really simple mathematic transformation, but then you have it stored in a new variable, which not only is organized nicely inside of your component, but that you could also track with dev tools. So what this does is it allows for really, really intuitive programming especially when you're doing something like I was doing, which is like a typing app, which is dealing with, some people can type pretty fast. So that actually means that things are changing pretty quickly. And you got to make sure that things are happening in the right order, even given asynchronous operations. It allows you to take a word, and let's say you're only concerned in the first word. I can create my whole new property for the first word, call it the first letter of the first word. And now if I'm curious what that is, rather than having to, say word dot split indexed at 1 or something like that, I can just say first letter. And I know a lot more intuitively what I'm looking at with each variable. So in React, doesn't really work. I'm going to kind of skip over some of that because the truth is that there's really not a great solution for that in React that I found. And if you guys know of some, I would be ecstatic to learn about it. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was dev tools. And this kind of is where a lot of this stuff ties in. And I actually figured I would go ahead. Am I getting some stuff in the chat here? I just saw like a little notification. If I have questions, though, I can't really see my chat for some reason. What I figured I would do is actually go ahead and show y'all the Doom Typer in Vue. By the way, if anybody wants to play this game, you can go to doomtyper.web.app. But anyways, so let me go ahead and go back to the game here. And here you can see I'm looking at all my words, which all my words is a computed property based off of, you know, I actually can't remember. It's been a while since I've looked at this project. But you can see as I'm typing, everything is changing. So all these are computed properties. So let's say this is something as simple as this is the input split up. Well, now I can actually track to see what everything is doing at once. So I ran into a lot of errors while I was developing this, for example, where, you know, maybe this wouldn't move over one. And I would have to ask myself, what's going on here? And what was really nice to have in front of me was all these dev tools with all these different properties that I could look at simultaneously. So that meant that, you know, even just something as simple as if I use current word right, instead of applying the math to search for current word right inside of a function, I know for a fact what this is at any given time. Whereas if I were to just copy all that logic over into a method or something like that, like I would have to kind of do in React, I wouldn't be able to know if maybe there was a small typo or if maybe there was something wrong going on there. But yeah, that's all I got for y'all. I should probably just tell a little bit about myself since it seems like there's maybe some time for it. But yeah, I'm currently a software developer seeking employment here. I've got some experience with data analytics. So that's Python, MATLAB. I actually have a background in like chemical engineering. I've done some back-end work on Rails and DynamoDB, front-end work, obviously, on Vue and React. And I've done, since I've graduated, I've done some work with Flutter, Android, and iOS. And I've lately had an interest in like statically typed languages and kind of getting into that. Feel free to reach out if you are interested in talking to me. That's all I got for y'all.
Yeah, so John, I know there was a question about sharing your slides afterwards. That was the one that popped up, but thanks so much for that. That's great. I think it's always interesting to, you know, weigh the pros and cons of a given framework and determine what works best for you. And I didn't know that you had such a nice dev tool there. But
yeah, it's
super handy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, did we have, I'm not seeing anybody speak up on the timeline, I guess, about the lightning talk or additional questions for John, but I really appreciate both John and Sam for giving those talks. And given that we had a speaker drop out tonight, I figured this would be a little bit shorter of a night. So with that, looks like we have some people checking out the Doom Typer. With that, I think feel free to stick around if you want to and chat about, you know, certain things. You could go play with John's Doom Typer and ask him questions about that or perhaps about Vue. But that pretty much concludes it for tonight. So please do keep your eyes peeled for updates about future events. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the event, we're absolutely looking for speakers here in the next few months. And we're even toying around with ideas of maybe going to, you know, like a less frequent meetup structure, given that we're all virtual right now. And so I'm curious if anyone has feedback on that sort of stuff. If you'd hate to see us go to a less frequent model, please do let me know. Things like that. I would love to hear feedback. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the night. So thanks for joining us. And like I said, if you want to stick around, feel free to. I'm going to check out. John, did you post your Doom Typer here into the On the